In the high-stakes world of global business, there are blunders, and then there are billion-dollar betrayals that reshape the landscape of entertainment forever. Picture June 1991 at the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago. Sony, a giant of consumer technology, proudly unveils a revolutionary new hardware project, the PlayStation. It was supposed to be a hybrid console, a marriage between the industry-leading Super Nintendo and Sony's cutting-edge CD-ROM technology. Sony's executives were smiling, confident they were about to enter the gaming market as the ultimate partner to the king. But less than 24 hours later, in a move that still echoes through boardrooms today, Nintendo took the stage and didn't talk about Sony. Instead, they announced a partnership with Sony's bitter rival, Philips. In one swift, brutal stroke, Nintendo hadn't just broken a contract. They had publicly humiliated a Japanese powerhouse. What they didn't realize was that this act of corporate treachery would ignite a fire within one brilliant, vengeful engineer named Ken Kutaragi, leading to the creation of the original PlayStation and $100 billion shift in power that would nearly destroy Nintendo's dominance. This wasn't just a business disagreement. It was the birth of the greatest rivalry in gaming history, and it all started because Nintendo was terrified of losing control. By the late 1980s, Nintendo was the undisputed emperor of the video game world. The Nintendo Entertainment System had single-handedly saved the industry from the 1983 crash, and the Super Nintendo was already poised to dominate the next generation. But as technology advanced, it became clear that the humble plastic cartridge was reaching its limits. CDs were the future. They could hold hundreds of times more data than a cartridge, allowing for cinematic music, real-world voices, and expansive worlds that were previously impossible. Nintendo knew they needed this tech, but they didn't have the expertise to build it themselves. Enter Sony. At the time, Sony was known for the Walkman and televisions, not video games, but one man saw the potential. Ken Kutaragi, a visionary engineer at Sony, had been secretly helping Nintendo improve their audio hardware. He convinced the higher-ups at Sony to partner with Nintendo to create a CD-ROM peripheral for the SNES. On paper, it was the perfect alliance. The world's best software maker meets the world's best hardware manufacturer. The contract was signed, and work began on what was codenamed the Super Disc. Sony would build the CD drive for Nintendo, and in exchange, Sony would be allowed to manufacture their own standalone console that could play both SNES cartridges and Sony's new proprietary CDs. This was the fatal flaw that Nintendo's president, Hiroshi Yamauchi, eventually spotted. Yamauchi was a man who ruled Nintendo with an iron fist and an obsessive need for control. When he reviewed the fine print, he realized that Sony's control over the CD format meant they would collect the royalties on every single CD game sold. In Nintendo's eyes, Sony wasn't just a partner. They were a Trojan horse trying to steal the kingdom. Yamauchi decided that Sony had to be stopped, but he wouldn't do it through a phone call or a polite legal meeting. He wanted to make sure Sony was too wounded to ever try competing again. While Sony's engineers were working around the clock to prep the 1991 CES announcement, Yamauchi was secretly negotiating with the Dutch company Philips. He offered them a deal that was far more favorable to Nintendo's control. The betrayal was timed for maximum impact. When Sony announced the PlayStation to the world's press on that Tuesday morning, they were at the peak of their professional pride. By Wednesday morning, Nintendo's Howard Lincoln stood before the same crowd and dropped the bombshell. Nintendo was moving forward with Philips. The Sony executives in the room were blindsided. In Japanese corporate culture, such a public loss of face is more than a setback. It's a declaration of war. Sony's leadership was furious. Many within the company wanted to scrap the project entirely and retreat from the toy business, considering it a stain on their reputation. But Ken Kutaragi refused to let it go. He stood before Sony's president, Norio Oga, and delivered a legendary ultimatum. He reminded Oga of the humiliation they had suffered, and told him that if they walked away now, they would always be the company Nintendo stepped on. He argued that they had the technology to build something far more powerful than anything Nintendo could imagine. Oga, fueled by his own anger at Nintendo, gave Kutaragi the green light. Kutaragi moved his team to a separate division of Sony, away from the skeptics who thought gaming was a fad. He knew that to win, he couldn't just copy Nintendo. He had to change the game entirely. While Nintendo was still focused on 2D sprites and cartridges, Kutaragi bet everything on 3D polygonal graphics. He saw that the world of cinema and the world of gaming were about to collide. He designed the PlayStation hardware to be an artist's machine, making it incredibly easy for developers to create complex 3D worlds. But the hardware was only half the battle. To kill a king, you have to take away his knights. For years, third-party developers like Square and Capcom had been frustrated by Nintendo's strict rules, high manufacturing costs for cartridges, and limited storage space. Sony offered them a different path. CDs cost pennies to manufacture compared to the dollars required for cartridges. This meant developers could take bigger risks, make more money, and create massive games like Final Fantasy VII that spanned multiple discs. When the PlayStation launched in 1994, it was a cultural explosion. It wasn't marketed as a toy for kids. It was marketed as a cool, sleek piece of technology for adults. It had the edge, the music, and the visual fidelity that Nintendo simply couldn't match. Nintendo, meanwhile, stuck to their guns. They released the Nintendo 64 years later, still using cartridges, still clinging to the idea that they needed to control every aspect of production. It was a massive strategic error. The N64 had incredible games, but it lacked the sheer volume and variety that the PlayStation provided. By the end of the 1990s, the PlayStation had sold over 100 million units, while the N64 struggled to reach a third of that. Sony had become the new king of the living room, and the PlayStation brand would go on to generate hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue over the following decades. Nintendo eventually found its footing again with the Wii and the Switch, pivoting toward innovation and unique playstyles rather than raw power. But the scars of the 1991 Betrayal never truly healed. The gaming landscape we see today, the dominance of high-end consoles, the focus on cinematic storytelling, and the massive third-party ecosystem is a direct result of that one day in Chicago. If Hiroshi Yamauchi had been more willing to share the royalties, we might be living in a world where Nintendo and Sony are still the same company, and the PlayStation as we know it would never have existed. Instead, his attempt to crush a potential rival created the very monster that would take his crown. It remains the most expensive no in the history of business. A $100 billion lesson in why you should never humiliate a partner who has the means and the motivation to become your greatest enemy. The PlayStation wasn't just a console. It was a revenge story told in polygons and pixels, a testament to the fact that in the world of technology, yesterday's ally is often tomorrow's biggest threat. As the industry continues to evolve into the world of cloud gaming and virtual reality, the story of the Nintendo-Sony split serves as a permanent reminder. Control is an illusion, but the consequences of betrayal are very, very real. Today, Sony stands as a titan, and Nintendo remains a beloved innovator, but they will forever be linked by those 24 hours at CES, where a simple handshake turned into a war that defined a century.